Many famous shipwrecks have been rediscovered in recent years, ranging from USS Indianapolis to two of the Japanese aircraft carriers off Midway. A large portion of these discoveries can be attributed to the intrepid RV Petrel expeditions, although there won't be more of those. However, for all of these discoveries, there are still some interesting wrecks left to find. These include such illustrious things as the final member of the Yamato class. This video will briefly look at 5 such examples, with an admittedly heavy focus on the Pacific War. Mostly because there are more notable wrecks here, in comparison to the largely merchant ship losses in the Atlantic. Although, to be fair, it will be more like 7 wrecks, because 2 are double features. In any case, let's begin with the ship I already mentioned. Probably the most interesting example on this list is Shinano, the final member of Japan's super battleships. Or rather, what would have been a super battleship by design. Shinano's story has been well covered, and fairly recently at that, with multiple videos on her this year alone. In simplest terms, the Japanese, in the face of heavy losses in ships and planes, decided to convert her. Not to a proper fleet carrier, but into an oversized version of HMS Unicorn, a support ship to provide spares and other supplies to the frontline warships. This would see Shinano scheduled for completion in 1945, before a further savaging in the Marianas Turkey Shoot prompted the Japanese to speed up her construction. The result would see Shinano launched in October 1944, and by late November complete to the point of sea trials. The Japanese were, however, concerned that their new ship had been spotted by American reconnaissance aircraft. As such, the still incomplete ship was set to move to Kure on November 28, 1944. This proved to be a bad idea. Shinano would ultimately be sunk en route by USS Archerfish on November 29th, largely due to flaws in her construction and her incomplete watertight protection. Her wreck has, to this day, not been discovered. At least not that I'm aware of. She sank in roughly 4,000 meters, 13,000 feet of water, making her one of the deeper wrecks out there. On top of this fact, Shinano's exact location is a bit of a mystery. We have a general idea of where she went down, but with wartime losses being what they are, we don't know for sure. As I've said before, with deep-water wrecks, it becomes a matter of finding a needle in a very deep, very dark, and very big haystack. In Shinano's case, and this will extend to another ship in this video, we have to find the haystack first. Her wreck should be interesting, however. The flaws in her construction do mean that the ship might have broken up at some point after she sank, or imploded depending on how much air was still inside. As such, it is entirely possible that she's in pieces on the bottom. On the other hand, however, she might be broadly intact. Tough to say for sure, but with both of her sister ships blowing up after they sank, Shinano might be the only chance at seeing a mostly intact hull of one of her class, conversion or not. The depth she sank to, furthermore, means that whatever is on the bottom is probably well preserved. Although, as she capsized while sinking, she might be upside down. Hopefully, at some point in the future, someone goes looking for her. She is, after all, the second largest aircraft carrier wreck on the bottom. That being said, it's time for the next example, sticking with Japanese aircraft carriers. While Akagi and Kaga were both located in 2019 by RV Petrel, and further explored this year, there are only 2 out of 4 aircraft carriers that Japan lost at Midway. Both Soryu and Hiryu remain missing at the moment. And these ships have their own points of interest in the fact that they're purpose-built aircraft carriers, not conversions like the other 2 were. Between the 2 missing wrecks, Soryu would likely be easier to find. While the very deep haystack thing still applies here, She sank in the same general area as Akagi and Kaga. Clearly not close enough to be found on any of the Midway search expeditions, but still a relatively easy target to hunt for, at least as these things go. However, even should she be found, Soryu would not be the most interesting wreck out there. At least if you like intact wrecks with recognizable decks and paint. She suffered 3 direct hits from 1,000-pound bombs. Coupled with her own aircraft and munitions exploding, Soryu burned badly. So badly, in fact, that she suffered the worst crew losses of any Japanese aircraft carrier at Midway. In all honesty, I would not expect there to be much left of her in the modern day. Not that this can't be interesting, as Kaga's wreck is in rough shape, and the video footage of her is some of the best wreck footage out there. Nonetheless, it's worth mentioning all the same. As for Hiryu, she would probably be the more interesting wreck. While she was hit by 4 of the same bombs that hit her half-sister, her fires were not quite as severe. Oh, she burnt badly, don't get me wrong, and her forward flight deck collapsed entirely. However, we have pictures from a Japanese aircraft that found her before she sank and after she was abandoned. The forward deck is destroyed, but everything aft of her bridge was still intact. Smoking badly, yes, but still there. There were about 2 hours between this sighting and when her final survivors, left behind in the evacuation, abandoned ship. Those men reported her sinking at that point, which does mean that her deck might have burnt more in the intervening time. On the other hand, it might also still be intact. Or, at the very least, the most intact deck of any Japanese wreck from Midway. We won't know for sure until she's found, and we learn how much further damage was done in the sinking itself. Of course, this ship is going to be very difficult to find. Hiryu sank well away from any other ships. I don't think we even have a general idea of where she sank. Finding her is going to be one of the more difficult shipwreck hunts in history, I think. In any event, that wraps up this section. Now it's time to leave Japan and move to the other side of the Pacific War. In a similar story to the last example, notable ships from the Battle off Samar have been located. USS Johnston and USS Samuel B. Roberts, both of which in excellent condition, considering their violent ends. And USS St. Lo, the largest ship from that engagement found to date. All of them resting in a range from 15,000 to 22,000 feet, or 4,700 to 6,900 meters in depth. That does, however, leave 2 ships left to find. USS Hoel and USS Gambier Bay. We can make pretty good guesses based on the other wrecks on how these 2 would look. USS Hoel, blasted to pieces by the Japanese, is likely a mess on the bottom. Johnston suffered similar damage, and she lost a good portion of her stern. While Hoel wasn't hit by 18-inch shells like her sister, she did suffer over 40 hits from lighter weapons. If part of her didn't fall off as she sank, I'd honestly be amazed. That said, I think she's worth looking for. She's less famous than Johnston and Sammy B because she didn't have Captain Evans' dogged determination or Samuel B. Roberts' outsized impact on the battle. However, Hoel charged right into the fray and fought until the ship literally couldn't fight anymore. I think a worthy memorial to the bravery of her crew, of whom only 86 survived their ordeal, would be finding their ship. Unfortunately, that will be no easy task. Her exact sinking location isn't known in the chaos of that battle. Furthermore, this is some of the deepest water on Earth. Johnston, for example, was so deep that Petrel's equipment couldn't survey her. With the result that Caledon Oceanic found her main wreck, along with the even deeper Sammy B, later on. USS Hoel is going to be at least as deep, and quite possibly deeper. This issue also applies to Gambier Bay, incidentally. Her wreck is also going to be very far down, and in likely just as bad of shape. Gambier Bay was battered by multiple Japanese ships, from battleships to cruisers. Her hull was riddled and shot to ribbons, while massive fires raged from stem to stern. At least she didn't, on the surface, explode like St. Lo did. So, I grant you, there's the chance her hull is in one piece, unlike her sister ship. Then again, with the sheer pounding she took, there's also every chance that Gambier Bay broke up as she drifted to the bottom. Even if her wreck is in one piece, it would be covered in shell holes and rusting at a much faster rate than other American wrecks. Much of her protective paint would have been burnt away, and that would lead to faster rusting. Plus, well, she capsized as she sank. If the wreck didn't right itself on the way down, she'll be upside down on the bottom. In any event, the expedition that found Sammy B was, initially, looking for Gambier Bay. While I'm unaware of any plans for a follow-up look, she was actively being looked for. I think it's only a matter of time at this point until she's found. The same cannot be said for the second to last example. In a break from the Pacific, from World War II, and from other warships, we come to an interesting example. Just about everything from the sinking of RMS Titanic has been covered to death. Her wreck is one of the most famous and most well-traveled in the world. For better or for worse. The ship that rescued her survivors, Carpathia, has similarly been located. All this being said, there is one ship involved in the sinking that has not been found. SS Californian, the ship that stood by. This small steamer is often, rightly or wrongly, blamed, along with her crew, for ignoring Titanic's distress and not steaming to the rescue. That's an argument I'm not going to get into in this video. It is, however, relevant. Californian was sunk by two different U-boats on November 9th, 1915. U-34 torpedoed her first, and then U-35 torpedoed her a second time while she was under tow. This sank her off the coast of Greece in about 10 to 13,000 feet, or about 3 to 4 kilometers of water. Her general sinking location is known, however, to my knowledge, no attempts have been made to locate her wreck. But, then again, there might be a certain level of, why bother looking for the ship that didn't help, in relation to Californian. Shipwreck hunting isn't cheap, even when you have a good idea where to look. Doubly so at that kind of depth. As such, I would be surprised if her wreck is located anytime soon. The wreck should be in relatively decent shape, however. While Carpathia is of a similar size and vintage, using her wreck, which is in very rough shape as a judge, doesn't quite work. Carpathia sank in only 500 feet of water. Californian is an order of magnitude deeper. While her old hull wouldn't fare well after so long underwater, well, the depth has probably preserved her better. We won't know, unfortunately, until someone finds her. The final example for today is an interesting question mark, I feel. HMS Barham is quite possibly the most famous battleship sinking out there. Not for anything the ship did, but for how far and wide the film of her sinking has spread. While most don't know the name or history of the ship involved, Barham has basically become generic sinking battleship. For better or worse, especially when her sinking is used to illustrate the sinking of, a German battleship. But in spite of the fame of her sinking on November 25th, 1941, her wreck hasn't been found. Or at least I haven't seen any evidence it's been found. If you Google search her wreck, the first thing you'll likely see is a company called Merlin Burroughs claiming to have found her. Not only do they provide exactly zero evidence of such, I'm not sure I would trust some random people claiming to find such a historically significant wreck. This isn't Petrol or Caledon, who at the very least provide sonar. This company has nothing but, oh yeah, we found Barham. With that in mind, and an entire container ship of salt directed at that claim, I'll stick with Barham has not been found yet. which is where it should be noted that there probably isn't much to find. The newer Italian battleship Roma sank in a similarly catastrophic manner. Her wreck is in pieces and buried on the bottom. Barham sank in a different area, but her explosion is famous for how massive it was. Whatever is left of her wreck is going to be in pieces. How many pieces and how big they are is an open question. But she's certainly not going to be in one piece. That said, at an estimated depth of around 3 kilometers, the deep water has probably done a good job of preserving whatever is on the bottom. With that, however, we come to the end of this video. I'll likely do another one because there are other missing wrecks to look at, but that's for the future. Now, for those still around, a quick postscript as it were. No, I would normally not do 2 videos in one day. Yes, this is an extra video. I wouldn't expect something like this to be a common occurrence, basically. Thank you for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy the content, and I'll see you in the next one.